He was under 2 meters tall, he didn't know how to shoot, he wasn't charismatic, and no one picked him. In a world full of predestined stars, he seemed doomed to be discarded. A player who didn't fit into any category, too short to be a center, too clumsy, they said he'd to play on the outside. They looked at him and saw limits, weaknesses, everything he lacked, but what no one saw was what weighed the most. Because that guy, that Wallace, didn't come to please, he came to disrupt, to frustrate, to break the script, and he did it from the least expected place. He had no media coverage, no highlights, not even a guaranteed spot in the league, but he did have something you can't train: hunger. He had to make his way through the shadows, earn every minute the hard way, and when they finally looked at him, it was already too late to stop him. And maybe that's why his story doesn't look like anyone else's. There was nothing to spare in his house. Food, clothes, time, space, everything was limited. Each older sibling took up space however they could, and Ben, being one of the youngest, learned early on that asking wasn't enough. You had to earn everything. Sometimes it meant fighting for a piece of bread, other times for a spot at the table, always to be seen. To help his mother, he worked from a young age, mowed lawns, cleaned yards, carried things. But the job that marked him the most and earned him the most money was with scissors in his hand. At 16, he built his first client base as the neighborhood barber, $3 a cut on the porch of his house. With that, he helped out at home, bought just what he needed, and in the process, learned patience and a steady hand. It was part of his routine: cut hair during the day, train at dusk, and keep moving as if his body didn't need rest. The streets made him strong, but home made him tough, because if there was one thing that never got cut in that house, it was the chaos. With so many older brothers, there was no room for gentleness. When he wanted to play basketball with them, they didn't even acknowledge him. They wouldn't pass him the ball. They pushed him, kicked him off the court. So if he wanted the ball, he had to steal it. If he wanted a rebound, he had to snatch it. They didn't invite him to play. They forced him to impose himself. And that's how he was shaped, among scissors, shoves, and the instinct to fight for what no one was willing to give him. He wasn't the tallest or the most skilled, but he was the most stubborn, the one who wouldn't give up even if they knocked him down. What began in a yard of red dirt among brothers who overlooked him ended up being the mark of his identity as a player. Ben Wallace didn't learn to play, he learned to survive, and in the NBA, that's worth more than any three-point shot. In 1992, when Ben was in his senior year of high school, he found out that Charles Oakley, yes, the toughest guy in the NBA at the time, was going to run a camp 160 kilometers from his home. There was no way he was missing that. He got in the car, drove to Livingston, Alabama, and went there to show what he could do: rebound, block shots, run, and if it came to throwing down, he was ready to throw down. But what he didn't expect was that Oakley, out of all the kids, would walk up to him and challenge him to a one-on-one. So far, so good. Until the first play, Oakley didn't hit him with a crossover, he hit him with a punch, a literal punch, right in the mouth, split his lip. Ben froze, touched his face, blood, looked at Oakley, and instead of backing down, he hit him back, went at his body, pushed him, threw a hand at him, showed him he wasn't going to be intimidated, not by an NBA player, not by anyone. Because if there was one thing he'd learned at home, it was that respect is earned with your body, not your words. And for Oakley, that was enough. Instead of getting mad, he took him under his wing. He saw potential, he saw fire, he invited him to train with him, got him connected with his circle, opened the door for him to go to Cuyahoga Community College near Oakley's home in Cleveland. That's where the more physical, more disciplined, more focused Wallace started to take shape. Ben never forgot that day. It was the turning point, that bizarre, violent moment that, instead of breaking him, set him on the right path. Sometimes the hit that feels unfair is the one that wakes you up. And in Wallace's case, that punch kick-started his career. After the camp with Oakley, Ben Wallace landed at Cuyahoga Community College. It wasn't Duke, it wasn't Kentucky, it was a technical college with basic facilities, empty stands, and games nobody watched. But for him, it was everything he needed. That's where he started showing what he'd brought from the dirt yard back in Alabama: raw strength, animal endurance, and a hunger that even triple doubles couldn't satisfy. He averaged 24 points, 17 rebounds, and 7 blocks. Not because he had polished technique, but because he went after every ball like it owed him something. He played like someone had told him it was his last shot, and maybe deep down, he felt that way. Oakley, who had kept tabs on him, didn't hesitate. He connected him with his former university, Virginia Union. A step forward in basketball terms, but another leap into obscurity in media terms. Division II, a historically black university ignored by the NBA radar. No cameras, no press, no scouts, but that didn't stop him. Wallace showed up, stood his ground, and took ownership of the team. It didn't even take a month for him to make his presence felt. He was a defensive leader, a lifesaver on every rebound, and a shield for his teammates. He became an All-American, led the team to the Final Four, and forced everyone to pay attention, everyone except the ones who make the decisions. At Virginia Union, he averaged 13 points, 10 rebounds, 3 blocks. Those weren't numbers that would get you into the first round or the second, but if someone only looked at those stats, they missed the whole story. Because Wallace didn't play for stats. His presence was like a magnet. It drew mistakes, forced bad shots, spread intensity. He was the soul of the team without needing to score 30 a night. And still, it wasn't enough because what made him special wasn't in the numbers. He didn't shine on offense. He wasn't 7 feet tall. He didn't have a marketable backstory. And the NBA doesn't look for what's invisible. Ben Wallace didn't hear his name on draft night. It wasn't a surprise. He knew he didn't have the marketing, the height, or the viral highlights, but it still hurt. Not being chosen wasn't just a disappointment. It was a sentence. To the teams, he simply didn't exist. Even so, he didn't give up. He got a tryout with the Boston Celtics. This was his chance. He was inside an NBA franchise with everything to prove, but instead of letting him play center, they made him guard shooters, run the perimeter, defend like a small forward. You can't play the 5 in this league, they told him, and they cut him before he ever had a chance to show who he really was. So he looked to Europe. He traveled to Italy, signed with Reggio Calabria, a small contract but a big opportunity. He played one game, and they sent him back. We're looking for someone with more experience, they said, a polite excuse to avoid saying what they really meant. You don't have a name, you're not useful to us. Back in the US, he was picked in the second round of the CBA draft, a minor league with no cameras and no promises. He was about to make his debut there, resigned when another call came in. The Washington Bullets wanted to see him. Another tryout, another shot. But Ben hesitated. He'd been down this road before. They'd taken him out of his position, made him prove himself in roles that weren't his. He was tired of being reshaped. Then Wes Unseld called. Not just any coach, a legend, an undersized center, just like him. And he said something that changed everything. If you come, you play in the paint. I don't want points, I want rebounds, I want grit. For the first time, someone didn't want to change him. They wanted him as he was. That day, Ben stopped asking for permission. He wasn't going to wait to be understood. He was going to force his way in, and Washington was the first door he kicked open. In Washington, Ben Wallace started as the 13th man on the roster. No name, no status, no role. But in practice, he was a bull. He hit the floor, banged with the starters, screamed for every rebound like it was Game 7. He didn't get minutes, but he had something no other bench player brought: unconditional energy. Strickland and Weber started talking about him, not because of what he did in games, but because of what he brought to every practice. With time, and thanks to some injuries, he got a few starts. He delivered, battled the biggest centers, and competed. But when the starters returned, so did his spot at the end of the bench. Nobody questioned his effort, but they questioned his size. Too small to play the 5, they said, and just like that, he was sent to Orlando. It looked like another discard, another move, another forgettable stop, but with the Magic, he got something he'd never really had: consistent minutes. And Wallace didn't waste them. He played like his life depended on every screen, even injured. He had a broken foot and still played. He'd take off his walking boot 20 minutes before tip-off, go out, give everything, then put it back on to limp back to the locker room. Doc Rivers believed in him, understood him, protected him, and he put him on the court when others would have chosen taller, flashier, better-known players. The team got better, and for the first time, Wallace stopped being a fill-in. He became a cornerstone, without scoring, without shining, but with a level of commitment that lit everyone up. He didn't have a big contract. He didn't have media attention, but everyone knew that when he was on the floor, the team played differently. In that locker room, they gave him a simple, precise nickname: Body, for how he trained, for how he lifted, and for how he threw himself into every collision without fear. He was muscle, effort, and presence, nothing more, nothing less. Summer of 2000, Orlando wanted to lock in Grant Hill, and Detroit wasn't willing to let him go for nothing. A sign and trade was set up. Hill would go to the Magic, and in return, the Pistons would receive Chucky Atkins and Ben Wallace. To the media, it was a cosmic joke. Grant Hill was a 5-time All-Star, a rising idol with a shoe deal, magazine covers, and global presence. And what did Detroit get? A short point guard who came out of nowhere, and a center averaging 4 points per game. Detroit lost the trade, they said. Some even called it the worst trade of the summer. But Wallace was never one to read the papers. He didn't need anyone to explain his place to him. He already knew that, in the eyes of many, he was still just a throw-in, so he did the only thing he knew how to do: battle. In practice, he went all out. In games, he smashed the boards. On every possession, he put his body on the line like he was defending his next meal. In just a few weeks, he went from the guy that came in the package to the heart of the team. He finished that season as the NBA's leading rebounder, averaged over 13 per game, played all 82 games, and racked up more blocks than almost any other big man. And all of that without even shooting the ball. Still, the credit didn't fully come Too small to play center, they kept saying. Too limited on offense. Even some executives within the franchise thought his production was just a hot streak, not something sustainable. So they went looking for bigger, more dominant centers, falling back into the same old mold. Meanwhile, Wallace kept doing his thing. He didn't ask for minutes. He earned them. He didn't talk about respect. He took it. It was during those first months in Detroit that his bond with the fans exploded. Not because he had flashy dunks or hit threes, but because he gave it everything. Because Pistons fans, heirs to the hard-nosed bad boys era, saw in him a reincarnation of that spirit. He still didn't have a name around the league, but in Detroit, every time he stepped on the court, the arena roared. He wasn't a star yet, but no one mistook him for a background player anymore. 2001 to 2002 season, the Pistons were coming off a 32-50 record. No star power, no reliable scorer, no hyped-up prospects, zero expectations. And yet, there was Ben Wallace, quiet, waiting. That year, Rick Carlisle took over as head coach, and the first thing he did was something wild, build the team around defense, but not just any defense, a defense with a name and a face. Ben Wallace's defense. Carlisle unleashed him, gave him total freedom, told him he trusted his instincts, his feel for the game, that unique way he had of reading plays before they happened. If a teammate blew a coverage, Wallace was there. If someone drove to the rim, they were going to meet a living wall. He jumped like he weighed nothing, covered half the court in 2 steps. It was like he played with a radar on. And he didn't need to score. In fact, he barely averaged 7 points a game, but that didn't matter. His presence changed the logic of games. A pass not made, a shot second-guessed, a star player turning away from the paint, elite opponents choosing jumpers over contact. His impact wasn't just physical, it was psychological. He ended the season leading the league in rebounds and blocks. He was voted Defensive Player of the Year with 116 out of 120 votes. In an NBA full of giants, he dominated at just 6 feet 7 inches, 2.01 meters. Because his strength wasn't size, it was reading, explosiveness, fearlessness. That year, Detroit went from just another team to a 50-win squad. They made the playoffs, and they did it without an offensive superstar. They did it by defending like wild animals. They did it with Wallace setting the tone, the pace, the soul. In practice, you could hear the echo of his shouts. In games, the crack of his blocks. During timeouts, teammates looked to him not for words, but for energy. He wasn't on magazine covers, he wasn't in the scoring leaderboards, but in every arena, every game, the message was the same. If you enter the paint, be ready, because in there, he's in charge, and if you hesitate even for half a second, he's already won. That season didn't just redefine what a defender could be in the modern era, it redefined Detroit, pulled it out of obscurity, made it dangerous again. And without knowing it, Wallace started to set the stage for the unthinkable. That a team without stars could take down a dynasty, and that a player without points could change the course of history. Detroit had made it to the finals against a squad of superstars, Kobe Bryant in his prime, an unstoppable Shaq, Karl Malone chasing his first ring, and Gary Payton running the floor as the veteran point guard. They were the Harlem Globetrotters with NBA contracts. Betting houses gave the Lakers an 87% chance to win the championship. Most analysts said the same thing. This ends in 4 games. Nobody was even talking about Detroit. The only question was how long the torture would last, but Ben didn't believe in predictions. He believed in the body, and he used his like a weapon. From the very first minute of Game 1, he went straight into the fight. He put his chest into Shaq, bone against bone. No help defense, no double teams. It was him, alone, holding off the monster. And it wasn't out of pride. Carlisle and the team had so much faith in Wallace, they preferred to leave him one-on-one. It was a statement. And the incredible thing, it worked. Shaq, who had destroyed everyone in the previous playoffs, ran into a wall. He couldn't bulldoze his way to the basket. He couldn't dominate the post. He didn't have time to think. Wallace frustrated him, forced him into bad shots, pushed him into constant discomfort, and the most powerful thing, he made him doubt. And when a titan like Shaq starts to doubt, the rest of the empire begins to crumble. Detroit didn't double him, not because they were reckless, but because they trusted Wallace could hold his own, because he'd already done it before, because he wasn't afraid, and because that's how he led, with his body, with example, and with sacrifice. In Game 5, with the series 3-1 in Detroit's favor and the city pulsing like a pressure cooker, Wallace had his crowning night. In a game where they could either seal the story or let it slip away, he chose to burn everything down. From the first quarter, it was clear every rebound was his, every loose ball his. He jumped, collided, shouted. There was no way to ignore him. When Shaq tried to post up, Wallace threw his torso into him like a wall. When Kobe floated toward the paint, Ben came out of nowhere with a block. That night, he played like the earth itself depended on his legs. He finished with 18 points, 22 rebounds, 3 steals, and one undeniable feeling. No player on that court inspired more fear than him. The Pistons won in a blowout, 100-87, at home, at the Palace, and they lifted the trophy in front of a crowd that wasn't just cheering anymore. It was roaring. Wallace led all of the playoffs in rebounds, finished second in blocks, and first in steals. Yes, a big man leading the postseason in steals, unheard of. In fact, he was the only player in that entire playoff run to finish top 5 in the 3 toughest defensive categories: rebounds, blocks, and steals. A complete monster. Billups was named Finals MVP, rightfully so, but in the hallways, in the practices, in the soul of the team, everyone knew who had tilted the scale. Ben Wallace didn't just stop Shaq, he stopped a dynasty, he stopped a narrative, he stopped the weight of the inevitable, and by doing that, he became immortal. Ben Wallace retired with an average of 5.7 points per game. He had no jumper, he had no height, he had no connections, but what he did have was respect from his teammates, from his rivals, from an entire league that at first didn't even want to draft him. He was a 4-time Defensive Player of the Year, NBA champion with the Pistons, the first undrafted player ever inducted into the Hall of Fame, and yet his greatest achievement isn't found in trophies, it's found in the invisible, in how he changed games without touching the ball, in how he led without yelling, in how he instilled fear without saying a word. The NBA is full of numbers, lights, jersey sales, and viral highlights, but Wallace was something else entirely. He wasn't a highlight phenomenon, he was a character phenomenon, a wall who didn't need to stand over 2 meters to look bigger than everyone else. His impact wasn't in what he scored, but in what he imposed. His very presence altered shots, broke schemes, and disrupted entire offenses. Because if you knew Ben Wallace was in the paint, you hesitated, and in basketball, half a second of doubt is already a loss. That's why, even as years go by, even as styles evolve and the game modernizes, Ben Wallace will remain a point of reference. Not for what he did with the ball, but for everything he achieved without it. And maybe that's the hardest thing to do. Drop your thoughts in the comment section. This was Hoop Secrets, and I'll see you next time.